My father showed up uninvited, 3 sharp knocks. No warning, just thunder and authority. He didn't say hello. He dropped a folder on my marble counter and said 850,000 by noon tomorrow. No apology, no explanation, just an order. And when I opened that folder, I saw my own signature forged in perfect ink. I smiled the way someone does right before cutting a wire. Because that night I stopped being the family's solution and started becoming their consequence. What happened after still keeps me up sometimes. Before I tell you everything hit like and tell me, have you ever been the one who finally said enough? People like to say family is everything. But in my house, family was a currency and I was the bank. I'm Elena, and I grew up in a Chicago suburb where appearances mattered more than the truth. My father, Victor Ward, built his business on control. Every dinner was a board meeting. Every favor came with interest. My younger sister, Melissa, learned early how to play his game, all soft eyes, trembling lips, and perfect timing. Whenever she cried, he'd stop the world to comfort her. Whenever I succeeded, he'd warn me not to show off. Our mother tried to balance him out, but after she passed, the house shifted. Silence became the rule, and obedience became love. I was 20 then, already paying tuition with scholarships, while Melissa got a new car to stay motivated. Dad said I was the strong one. What he meant was you can handle being used. Fast forward 10 years. I had my own consulting firm downtown, glass walls, city view, and a reputation built from 16-hour days and 0 shortcuts. Success didn't make me feel proud. It made me useful again. My father would brag to anyone who listened that his daughter managed portfolios for CEOs, but when we spoke, it was never to ask how I was only, "Can you take care of this for me?" I told myself it was okay. It was family. And family always comes first, right? Then came the night that cracked everything open. It was early winter, one of those Chicago nights when the wind cuts straight through your coat. I was finishing a report when 3 knocks hit my door hard, deliberate like a verdict. I opened it, and there he was, Victor Ward. Gray hair, slicked back suit, immaculate, holding a folder so thick it bent in his hand. He didn't ask to come in. He just walked past me, the smell of expensive cologne following like smoke. Melissa's husband made some mistakes, he said, pacing my kitchen. They owe $850,000. You'll handle it. I thought I misheard. Excuse me. He didn't repeat it. He just opened the folder pages of numbers, loan documents, receipts, and then at the bottom, my name, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. For a moment, the room tilted. I stared at that neat black ink and realized he'd forged it. My own father had used my name, my credit, my reputation to guarantee Melissa's debts. He kept talking, explaining, justifying, until the words turned to noise. I remember his tone more than his sentences, that old authority that didn't need my consent. Family doesn't turn its back when things get hard, he said finally, and I smiled, a small, quiet smile that made him step back without realizing why, because for the first time I wasn't afraid to lose them. That night, while the city hummed below my window, I poured myself a drink, stared at the folder and whispered, "All right, Dad, you want control. Let's see what happens when I take it back." The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise. Melissa, then Dad, then both. I didn't answer. I just watched the names flash and fade until the screen went black again. When I finally called back, Melissa's voice trembled like a rehearsed song. "Please, Lena, don't be mad. Derek just made a bad investment. We'll pay you back. We'll pay you back." The same words she'd said when I covered her tuition, when I bought her first house, when she maxed out their joint credit card by accident. "Melissa," I said quietly. Dad forged my name. She went silent for a beat. Then she whispered, "He did it for us. You know how he gets." That sentence stuck to my skin like oil. You know how he gets. As if manipulation were a personality trait, not a choice. By afternoon, Dad showed up again, this time at my office. The receptionist looked terrified as he marched in. Coat unbuttoned, tie, loosened, pretending he owned the place. 850 by noon, he said, like we were in a boardroom. Those people aren't patient. I looked around at my staff, pretending not to listen. My face burned. "You don't get to threaten me here," I said. He smirked. "You've got the money, Elena. Don't make me remind you who raised you." That was the moment something shifted. The humiliation, the control, the lifelong conditioning, all of it condensed into one sharp, steady breath. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes later. I was awake. After he left, I sat alone in my office, lights dimmed the city outside, wrapped in fog. I thought about every time I'd saved them, every check I'd written, every thank you that really meant you owe us more. And suddenly, the guilt I'd carried for years cracked open. Beneath it was something colder clarity. That night, I drove to my mother's old house, the one Dad kept locked but never sold. The key still worked. Dust floated in the flashlight beam as I walked through rooms that once smelled like cinnamon and Sunday dinners. On her desk sat a small wooden box. Inside were her journals, her handwriting neat and certain. Kindness without boundaries becomes servitude. I closed the lid and smiled. By the time I stepped back into the cold, the plan had already started forming, precise, deliberate, inevitable. The next 48 hours moved like a storm that only I could hear. Outwardly, I was calm, answering emails, drinking coffee, showing up at meetings. Inside, every word my father had ever used as a weapon replayed in perfect clarity. Family comes first. Don't embarrass us. You're the strong one. It all sounded like a single command obey. Not this time. That night, I called Claire Nguyen, my attorney, and the one person who knew what my silence really meant. "I need to lock everything down," I told her. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Quiet or public quiet," I replied. "For now." Within an hour, the firewall went up. Every trust account and property Dad had linked to my name was frozen. I revoked his signatory rights from the family foundation he'd attached to my Social Security number for convenience. The word tasted bitter now. While the documents processed, I started building my own. I scanned receipts, tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, transfers labeled temporary help, each one proof that I'd been financing their comfort for years. I didn't realize until then how thick the pile would be. Claire called again near midnight. "You're sure about this? Once it's done, there's no going back." "I'm already gone," I said. The next morning, I packed a plain cardboard box. Inside, copies of every wire transfer, property, deed, and loan note. On top, a printed message. "You taught me control, Dad, but control without honesty is manipulation. This isn't revenge, it's accountability." When I sealed the box, the sound of tape cutting through air felt like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. At dawn, I left it on the foyer table, right beneath the portrait of him shaking hands with a governor, the same smile he used when cornering people. I stood there for a full minute staring at the photo, remembering how proud he'd looked when Melissa married Derek, how he'd called her my delicate one, and me, my insurance. By the time sunlight touched the skyline, my bags were packed. Passport, laptop, one photo of Mom and me at the lake. I booked a one-way flight east. No goodbyes, no explanations. When I closed the apartment door behind me, the silence felt different, alive, charged like freedom, waiting for confirmation. 12 hours from then, Victor and Melissa would stand on that same doorstep demanding money, and all they'd find would be that box, my final gift, wrapped in truth. At exactly noon, my building's doorbell camera caught the first shadow. Victor Ward didn't knock. He announced himself the way men who never hear no do. His reflection flashed in the brass door handle. Jaw-tight coat, immaculate, the same arrogance he'd worn my entire life. Behind him, Melissa shifted her weight from one heel to the other, eyes red, face powdered to hide the wreck. "Open up, Elena." His voice cracked through the intercom. We had an agreement. He pounded the door again. The camera picked up every echo, every vibration against the silence I'd left behind. Then he saw it, the plain brown box sitting neatly on the marble floor inside, visible through the glass panel. My handwriting clean and even stretched across the top, Victor Ward. Melissa leaned forward. "What's that?" He frowned. "Probably a note." "She's being dramatic." He tried the handle locked, of course. Then, like control itself demanded submission, he pulled a small metal tool from his pocket. My father had always believed every door would open for him eventually. When he stepped inside, the camera blinked red. He set the folder he'd brought his copy of the debt on the counter beside the box. Then he tore the tape open. Papers spilled out like confession. Wire transfers, signed checks, copies of every payment I'd ever made on their behalf. The deeds to Melissa's house and Derek's failed business, all under my LLC. A printed email trail between him and a broker approving a forged signature mine. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, flipping pages faster. Melissa hovered behind him. Is she suing us?" He ignored her. His fingers trembled. The man who built empires on intimidation was finally holding proof of his own collapse. Then he found the USB drive. Small, silver, marked with a single word, "Listen." He plugged it into the small Bluetooth speaker on my counter, the same one he'd once called a waste of money. My voice filled the room low and steady. "You taught me that family comes first, but you also taught me how to lie, how to control, how to take. What's inside this box isn't revenge, Dad. It's the truth. You called it family. I called it debt. Now we're even." A pause. Then the faint sound of waves recorded from the main shoreline I was watching that very moment. Melissa covered her mouth. She recorded this. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the last photo sitting on top of the documents, the three of us at my college graduation, his arm around Melissa, his hand resting on her shoulder. I stood on the edge of the frame, cropped by someone who thought symmetry mattered more than daughters. He reached for the note beneath it, my handwriting again. "If you ever loved me for who I am, not for what I can fix, you'll stop knocking on my door and start looking in a mirror." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He sank into one of my bar stools, the leather creaking beneath the weight of everything he'd built. Melissa whispered, "Dad, what do we do?" He whispered back, "We lost her." For once there was no command, no instruction, just defeat. Across the country, I sat on the porch of a small cottage overlooking the Atlantic. My laptop buzzed with notifications from Claire. Each message was surgical, clean trust secured, power of attorney revoked, Ward Holdings audit approved. I watched the tide climb the rocks and thought of him staring at that box, of Melissa's eyes wide with the realization that the family hierarchy had flipped, and I was no longer holding the safety net. By evening, the ripple hit the surface. Ward Holdings board called an emergency meeting. The bank demanded verification on a series of unauthorized accounts. By nightfall, every dollar my father had hidden beneath my name was frozen. The next morning, my phone, a new number, buzzed with messages from Claire. Victor Ward resigned. Board replaced him with interim CEO. Melissa called crying, said Derek disappeared. "Do you want me to respond?" I typed back, "No." Let her learn the silence she never gave me. Days blurred into calm. I went walking every morning, breathing air that didn't smell like concrete and control. In the afternoons, I read by the window, ocean light spilling across pages. Sometimes between paragraphs, I'd imagine the look on his face when the last mask cracked. Then one night, my laptop chimed a new video file sent from my doorbell camera. Mrs. Callahan, my elderly neighbor, had forwarded it with a note. "Thought you'd want to see this, honey." I opened it. Melissa stood on my porch under the same porch light. Her mascara streaked her designer coat, slipping off one shoulder. She held the brown box in both hands, shaking. "Lena," she screamed, "we're family. You can't just vanish." Her voice cracked on the last word. She dropped to her knees, crying not for me, but for the life that had finally stopped cushioning her. I watched until the video ended, until the still frame froze on her face mid-cry. Then I closed the laptop. That was the hardest part, learning that walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you stop saving. A week later, my father called. Unknown number, but his silence on the line was unmistakable. "Elena," he said, finally, his voice stripped of its usual steel. We need to talk. I didn't respond at first. The wind outside howled like the city had followed me east. Why, I asked. Because I finally understand what you did. He inhaled shakily. You embarrassed me. But you were right. Melissa's furious, Derek's gone, and the company's a disaster. But for the first time, I'm seeing things clearly. You were never the problem. I was. I pressed my fingers to my temple, closing my eyes. Dad. I saw your mother in you that night, he continued. That calm, she had it too. She'd have been proud you did something I never could. Walk away. For the first time in my life, I heard regret without performance. Not guilt used as leverage, real, raw regret. What happens now, I asked. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe we start by being honest. He let out a weak laugh. Maybe one day I'll visit. No folders, no demands. Bring coffee, I said softly. Not debt. His laugh deepened, sad but human. Deal. When the call ended, I sat there, phone still warm in my hand, the ocean murmuring beyond the window. For years, I'd thought power came from control. Turns out, it comes from release. At that moment, somewhere across the continent, I knew he'd seen the empty space where my box once sat, and finally understood that it wasn't revenge I'd left behind. It was truth. 3 months later, I had almost forgotten what constant tension felt like. Maine had a rhythm that demanded you slow down, gulls, screaming over the dock, the smell of salt and coffee drifting through every window. I rented a small place near the water and started teaching a weekly workshop at the Community Center Financial Boundaries for Women. 10 seats, always full. They came with the same stories told in different voices: the mother who kept bailing out her grown son, the sister who couldn't say no, the wife whose husband used her credit card just for now. Each time I spoke, I heard pieces of my past echo back at me. And for the first time, it didn't sting. It clarified. One evening after class, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until instinct whispered her name. Lena Melissa's voice was quiet, almost shy. I heard you're teaching, she said. Dad's doing better. Joined some accountability group. He even writes letters now. I smiled faintly. That sounds new. I got a job at a furniture store, she continued. Real one. No commissions, no excuses. It's quiet. Quiet's good, I said. Means you stopped running. She hesitated. Thank you for not rescuing me. When the call ended, I sat on the porch, the tide inching closer, silver under the moonlight. The past felt like something far behind, not hovering anymore. Somewhere inside the house, the kettle whistled. I stood up, whispered to the waves, "That's enough." A few weeks later, I opened my mailbox and found a postcard. A photo of a fishing dock, the handwriting uneven but familiar. You were right. I taught you everything about business and nothing about love. Learning now. Proud of you. Dad. I pinned it above my desk beside a note from one of my students that said, "You helped me say no for the first time." That night, I walked down to the shore. No phone, no noise, just the soft rhythm of waves and the kind of freedom that doesn't need permission. If this story hits close to home, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what enough means to you.
My name is Cynthia Balling. I'm 29, and I used to believe honesty was the simplest thing in the world. You either told the truth or you didn't. There weren't shades, loopholes, or polite omissions that somehow still counted as not lying. At least that's what I believed until Barry. Barry had a talent for shaping words until they sounded harmless. He said things like, "I just didn't mention it with a smile so easy, you'd forget to ask what it was." I used to think his charm came from confidence. Now I know it came from control. When we met 3 years ago, I was the quiet one. Calm, organized, deliberate. He was light itself. The kind of man who turned every room brighter, who made people laugh without effort. He said I made him feel grounded, that I was the calm after every storm. It sounded romantic at first, until I realized storms don't actually want to be grounded. They want to keep destroying things. Our life together wasn't flashy. I worked as a UX designer from home. He was in marketing, always half living through a glowing screen. Evenings were simple. I'd cook dinner, he'd pour wine, we'd talk about our days. Sometimes we'd watch shows curled up on the couch, sometimes walk along the park trail, fingers brushing together. It felt safe, and safe to me meant love. But lately, safe had started to feel like a performance. He began turning his phone face down when I walked by, laughing at messages he never shared. He'd say, "It's just the team group chat, babe. You'd be bored." Except his smile had that too perfect balance of warmth and distance. The kind that says, "I know you're suspicious, but I'll make you feel guilty for it." One Tuesday evening, while I was washing dishes, he leaned against the counter, scrolling through his emails. "Hey, forgot to tell you," he said casually. "Next weekend, I'm flying to Denver. Marketing retreat thing, brand workshop, corporate fun." He smirked, like even he didn't believe his own joke. "Denver," I asked, drying my hands. "Since when?" "Oh, just came up. 3-day deal. Don't worry, I'll still call you at night." He didn't look up from his screen once. His tone was rehearsed, too steady, like he'd already practiced this conversation. I wanted to ask who else is going. "Where are you staying? Why didn't I hear about this sooner?" But I swallowed the questions. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Instead, I smiled and said, "Have fun." When the morning came, I drove him to the airport. He kissed me on the cheek, just the cheek, and whispered, "You're the best, you know that." I nodded, pretending not to notice the missing words. "I love you." That weekend, the apartment felt too big. I tried not to think about him. I cleaned, called my sister, even joined a friend for brunch. But on the third night, loneliness crawled in. I opened Instagram, scrolling through stories from mutual friends, not even sure what I was looking for. Then I froze. A photo, posted by Sophie, one of Barry's coworkers. They were on a rooftop bar, Denver skyline glowing behind them. And there, between Sophie's laughter and the city lights, sat Barry, his arm draped casually behind a woman's chair like it belonged there. Tessa, his ex. The caption read, "Reunited crew, now Denver nights, #old times." I didn't even feel my heartbeat at first, just a strange stillness, like every sound in the world had vanished. The phone slipped slightly in my hand. It wasn't the photo itself that hurt. It was how calm he looked, how comfortable, like the lie wasn't new, it was practiced. I stared at the screen for a long time, tracing the pixels of his smile, the curve of her shoulder leaning closer to him. Then I locked my phone and sat on the couch, hands trembling but eyes dry. I thought of his words, "Don't worry, I'll still call you at night." He hadn't called, not once. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't scream. It whispers. It comes wrapped in routines, in excuses, in sentences that start with, "Don't make this a big deal." And somewhere between those little lies and your silence, love turns into something unrecognizable. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the balcony, stared at the city lights below, and whispered the sentence that would echo for weeks afterward. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell me. And for the first time, I understood that omission can be louder than deceit. The wind brushed my hair across my face, cold against the tear that finally escaped. Inside, the apartment glowed softly under the lamp. He'd once said made the place feel warm. Now, it just illuminated the emptiness he left behind. I turned off the light, and in the darkness, I started to plan the truth he would never see coming. When Barry came back from his work retreat, he was glowing. That was the first thing I noticed. His skin had that sun-kissed sheen you only get from days outdoors, not from conference rooms. His hair looked freshly trimmed, and he walked into the apartment, humming suitcase rolling behind him like a trophy. "Hey," he said, smiling wide. "Miss me?" I forced a soft laugh. "Of course." He kissed my forehead, not my lips. I could smell citrus and something floral perfume that wasn't mine. "How was Denver?" I asked as he poured himself a glass of water. "Productive. Long days, boring presentations," he said, eyes fixed on his phone. "You know how those retreats are. Team building, forced fun." "Yeah," I murmured. "I've heard." He didn't look up, and that told me everything I needed to know. After his shower, he came out in a white t-shirt, hair damp, scrolling through messages. He flopped onto the couch beside me, close enough to touch, but miles away in presence. I waited. I wanted to see if he'd tell me, if he'd mention her. He didn't, so I said it for him. "How's Tessa doing these days?" His hand froze mid-scroll. "What?" I met his eyes. "Tessa, your ex, looked like a nice rooftop bar in Denver." The silence stretched thin between us. He blinked once. Then, like someone who'd practiced a script, he exhaled and leaned back. "Oh my God, Cynthia, you're not serious." "I am," I said quietly. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "We ran into each other. Pure coincidence. You're really blowing this up for no reason. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed calm. You never mentioned she'd be there. He set his phone down, rubbing his temples like I was exhausting him, because it wasn't a big deal. One drink, Cynthia. We caught up, that's all. I didn't lie to you. I tilted my head. You just didn't tell me. He looked relieved, almost proud. Exactly. The words sat between us, sharp and poisonous. He didn't hear how they sounded, but I did. I heard the arrogance of someone who thought truth was optional. You didn't think I deserved to know I asked. He sighed. You would have overreacted. I was trying to avoid a scene. I stared at him for a long time. You avoided honesty, I said softly, not conflict. He stood up, pacing. This is ridiculous. You're acting like I cheated or something. I didn't say you did. Then what's the problem? The problem, I said, is that you made a choice for both of us and called it kindness. He turned to me, frustration rising. You're impossible. You twist everything I say. I almost smiled. No, Barry. You twist everything you say. I just finally stopped untwisting it for you. His jaw tightened. Maybe if you trusted me. Trust goes both ways, I interrupted, calm, deliberate. You can't hide things and then blame me for not trusting you. He ran a hand through his hair. You're overthinking again. I looked at him, this man I'd once thought I'd marry, and saw a stranger rehearsing a defense, not a partner seeking forgiveness. Something inside me shifted, small but irreversible, a click, like the sound of a lock turning. That night I lay beside him in bed. His breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine wasn't. The ceiling above me felt closer than usual, pressing down. I replayed every moment of our conversation, every expression, every word. And what haunted me most wasn't his lie, it was how easily he'd told it, how natural deceit felt rolling off his tongue. He mumbled something in his sleep, smiling faintly. I turned away, pulling the blanket tighter, as if distance could mute the echo of his voice. You're overreacting. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. It looped in my head until it became a heartbeat. By morning, the decision was there, quiet and solid. I would leave. Not dramatically, not in fury, just quietly. Because some exits don't need doors slamming. Sometimes the silence itself is enough to say I'm done. Over breakfast, he acted like nothing happened. He complimented the coffee, scrolled through news, asked about my work project. I smiled back, played along. When he left for the office, I watched from the window as his car pulled away. The street below shimmered in sunlight, and for the first time in months, I felt the smallest flicker of relief. That afternoon, I opened my laptop not to work, but to search. Rental listings, one-bedroom apartments, short-term leases, quiet neighborhoods. A new start hidden in a browser tab he'd never see. I bookmarked one that caught my eye. Bright windows, hardwood floors, a tiny balcony facing west. Peaceful. Mine. As I closed the laptop, my reflection ghosted faintly across the screen. I didn't look broken, just awake. In the kitchen, his empty mug sat on the counter. I washed it, dried it carefully, and placed it back on the shelf, like returning something borrowed that I no longer wanted. He thought the lie ended when I stopped arguing. But the truth was just beginning to take shape, wordless, patient, and waiting for me to follow it. I didn't know what freedom looked like yet, but I knew what it didn't look like. And it didn't look like him. It's strange how silence can become routine. After that night, Barry and I stopped arguing, not because things were fixed, but because something in me had gone quiet. I no longer felt the urge to convince him of anything. You can't reason someone out of a lie they built to live in. Days blurred together. He talked. I listened less. He reached for me. I didn't reach back. He didn't notice at first, or maybe he pretended not to. Long day, he'd ask, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. The longest I'd reply with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. He'd kiss the top of my head, and I'd stand still, body present, mind already elsewhere. At night, he'd scroll through his phone until midnight, the screen's glow flickering across his face like a confession he didn't realize I could see. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the darkened window, someone detached, foreign, no longer waiting to be chosen. The next morning, I began my quiet escape. I started with the smallest things. My old sketchbook, a pair of sneakers I rarely wore, then my favorite mug, the one he never noticed missing because he never made coffee for me. When he asked about the missing clutter, I smiled. Just decluttering. You know me can't stand mess. He chuckled, not suspecting a thing. Why would he? I'd spent years making him comfortable. Every night while he slept, I'd sit in the living room and look around. The framed photos on the wall, our trip to Seattle, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. The throw blanket he insisted on buying. the fake plant I used to water by habit. Every piece of our life together now looked like set dressing props from a play I was done performing. Somewhere between exhaustion and relief, I realized the truth. I wasn't leaving because of one lie. I was leaving because I'd stopped recognizing myself in the reflection he loved. The night before I left, he made dinner pasta with garlic bread, his attempt at effort. Music played softly from his phone. He poured us both wine, smiling like the past few weeks hadn't happened. To him, they probably hadn't. "Can we just move past this?" he asked halfway through the meal. "I hate feeling like you're still mad." "I'm not mad," I said. "Then what?" I set my fork down carefully. "I'm just done." He blinked, then laughed, awkward, disbelieving. "Done with what?" "With pretending." His smile faltered. "You're being weird lately. Did something happen?" I met his eyes. "Yeah, you happened." He looked genuinely hurt for a second, then the mask slipped back on. "You're really throwing everything away because I didn't tell you about one stupid drink." I didn't answer. I just stood, carried my plate to the sink, and rinsed it under cold water. He kept talking voice-rising questions, tumbling after me. I dried my hands, turned off the light, and walked past him. He called my name once. I didn't look back. That night, I lay beside him again. He fell asleep easily, as always. But I stayed awake, eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling, memorizing the shape of a place that had already stopped feeling like home. Before dawn, I rose quietly. The air felt heavy, charged with finality. I dressed, zipped my duffel bag, and walked to the doorway. For a moment, I almost left a note, something short, something kind. But then I remembered his words. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. So I folded the paper back into the drawer and whispered to the room. Then I won't tell you either. By the time the sun rose, I was gone. When he woke up, I imagined he still smelled coffee in the air, still heard the echo of my footsteps in the hall. Maybe he thought I'd gone to work early. Maybe he thought nothing at all. I didn't check my phone for hours. When I finally did, there were 3 missed calls. Then a text. "Hey, where are you? Thought you were working from home today. Did you take your stuff somewhere? Half your closet's empty. Cynthia, what the hell is going on? What the hell is?" I didn't reply. By then, I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, bare walls, echoing space sunlight streaming through uncurtained windows. The air smelled like paint and possibility. For the first time in years, there was no tension humming beneath my ribs, no waiting for his next explanation, no deciphering half-truths disguised as kindness. Just quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that hurts. It was the kind that heals, the kind that says, "You did it. You got out." Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Another text. "We need to talk. This isn't funny." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I turned it over, face down exactly the way he used to. A poetic symmetry, I thought. He'd hidden his truth from me once. Now I was hiding my peace from him. He would call it running away. I would call it walking toward myself. And if he ever asked why I left without saying goodbye, I'd tell him the truth. He said he didn't lie, so I decided not to tell him either. The silence lasted 4 days. 4 whole days, without his name lighting up my phone. No messages, no calls, no "where did you go" posts. Just quiet until the 5th morning, when the world reminded me that peace never stays unbothered for long. My phone buzzed at 9:12 a.m. with a message from a mutual friend. "Hey, Cynthia, have you seen Barry's stories?" I hadn't. I'd unfollowed him the night I left, not out of spite, but self-preservation. But curiosity, it's a cruel thing. It whispers, "Just one look." So I looked. There he was. A filtered selfie at a wine bar, that familiar half-smile carefully rehearsed. Captioned, "Sometimes you have to let insecure people remove themselves so real love can find you." Insecure. There it was again, his favorite word when truth cornered him. Another story followed a boomerang of him clinking glasses with coworkers. Caption, "No explanations needed when you have nothing to hide." And then one more, a quote, graphic in neutral beige tones. "Growth is choosing peace, even if it costs you people who misunderstand you." He was performing calmness, curating the narrative, turning himself into the victim of my escape. I should have been angry, but mostly I felt tired of the theater, tired of how easily he could rebrand pain as self-awareness. He was doing what he always did, rewriting reality, until even he believed it. I set the phone down, exhaled, and looked around my new apartment. It was still mostly empty. A mattress on the floor, 2 cardboard boxes stacked as a coffee table, my laptop sitting beside a cup of cold tea. but it felt more alive than any place I'd shared with him. For the first time, my thoughts weren't being edited for someone else's comfort. I could just exist, messy, uncertain, healing. That evening, I lit a candle, cooked pasta, and played old jazz on low volume. No background tension, no unspoken questions, just the sound of rain tapping against the window and the gentle hum of my own solitude. When my phone buzzed again, I ignored it. But it buzzed a second time, and a third. I sighed and finally flipped it over. Barry. So you're just done? No explanation. Unbelievable how fast you gave up. At least I didn't sneak around and lie like you did. I stared at the screen, the irony so thick I almost laughed. He couldn't stand that I hadn't given him a scene, that I'd left him nothing to argue with. He needed my reaction to feed the story he was spinning. But I wasn't playing anymore, so I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message came through. You'll regret this. You'll realize no one else will ever love you like I did. That one made me smile, because for once he was right. I didn't want anyone to love me like that ever again. Over the next few weeks, his online posts shifted. The bravado faded. The captions turned from triumphant to bitter. Funny how people can walk away like you never meant anything. Some people mistake silence for guilt. They'll regret losing you one day. I didn't respond. I didn't even watch the stories anymore. He was shouting into an empty theater, and I had already left the show. Instead, I filled the quiet with things that were mine again. Mornings started with sunlight and coffee, not tension and suspicion. I picked up running, something I'd stopped because Barry said it made me too obsessed with structure. I called friends I hadn't seen in months. One of them cried when I showed up at her doorstep. You look lighter, she said. I feel lighter, I admitted. At night, when loneliness crept in, I'd sit on the balcony wrapped in a blanket watching the city below. There was a different kind of peace there, not absence but presence, like I was finally inhabiting my own life again. And yet some nights I'd still think of him, not with longing, but curiosity, how someone could build a version of you so false and still sleep peacefully beside it. I wondered if he'd ever realize that lying isn't just about words, it's about omission tone, the silence that manipulates more than speech ever could. One evening I got another message, this one quieter. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. It's okay, I'm not angry. His reply came fast. You sound so cold. Just calm, I answered. Minutes later, another bubble appeared. Can we meet just to talk? There's nothing left to talk about. He didn't like that. You're acting like I cheated. I made one mistake, Cynthia. I know, I wrote back. I made mine too. I stayed. I hit send and felt something release inside me, like the final thread snapping cleanly apart. That night, I slept through the entire night for the first time in months. No twisting thoughts, no imagined explanations, just quiet breathing, steady and full. By morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window, soft and forgiving. I brewed coffee, took a sip, and smiled at the taste. It was too strong, a little bitter, imperfect. But it was mine. He could keep his curated captions, his audience, his pity. I had something far rarer. Peace. And peace, I learned, doesn't need to announce itself. It just waits until you're ready to hear it. 2 months passed before I saw him again. By then, the sting had dulled into something quieter. A faded ache that only hummed when the world went still. I'd settled into my new apartment. The walls no longer echoed, my plants had stopped dying, and the nights didn't feel so heavy anymore. Sometimes I still caught myself glancing at my phone before bed, expecting a message that never came. But the space where his name used to appear felt less like a wound and more like a scar, a reminder of healing already underway. Then one afternoon, fate, or irony, decided to play its cruel little joke. I was standing in line at a cafe downtown waiting for my iced coffee when I heard his voice. Low, familiar. Like a song you'd forgotten you knew every word to. I turned, and there he was. Barry? He looked different, smaller somehow. The glow he used to carry had dimmed. His shirt was wrinkled hair, unkempt eyes tired. The confident smirk he once wore like armor had been replaced by a tight, hesitant smile. Cynthia. His voice wavered just enough for me to know he hadn't expected to see me either. Hey, I said softly, keeping my tone even. We stood there surrounded by strangers and espresso steam, that awkward silence stretching between us. He gestured toward an empty table. Do you have a minute? Part of me wanted to say no, to walk away and let that be the end of it. But closure is a strange thing. Sometimes you have to look a ghost in the eye to make sure it's really dead. So I nodded. We sat down across from each other, the table small enough that our knees almost touched. He fiddled with his cup eyes, darting everywhere but mine. "You look good," he said finally. "Different. Happier." "I am." He gave a small laugh. "So that's what peace looks like, huh?" I smiled faintly. "You tell me. You were the expert on peace, remember. Growth is choosing calm even if it costs you people." His smile faltered. "You saw that post." "I saw them all." He looked embarrassed for the first time since I'd known him. "Yeah, that was me trying to convince myself I was fine." "And were you?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No." The honesty caught me off guard. It didn't sound rehearsed this time. "I thought if I said it enough I'd believe it," he continued. "But everything just fell apart. Work's been a mess. Friends took sides. And Tessa..." He stopped, eyes flicking up to gauge my reaction. I raised an eyebrow. "Tessa." He exhaled, long and shaky. "Yeah. We tried getting back together after you left. Didn't last. Turns out she's not who I thought she was." I almost laughed, not from cruelty, but disbelief. They usually aren't. He winced. "Guess I deserve that." I shrugged. "It's not about deserving, Barry. It's about cause and effect." He leaned forward, voice softer now. "I know I messed up, Cynthia. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just..." He paused, searching for words. "I miss the way you made me feel. Safe. Like I could be myself." That word again. Safe. It used to sound like love. Now it just sounded like dependency. "Barry," I said quietly, "you didn't want safe. You wanted reassurance. You wanted to keep testing the boundaries of my forgiveness to make sure I'd never leave. That's not love. That's control, dressed as affection." His throat worked as he swallowed. "You think that's all it was?" "I don't think I said. I lived it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy, full of the ghosts of every conversation we never finished. Then he said, "What if we tried again?" Slowly. "I've changed." I almost smiled at the déjà vu. "You told her that too, didn't you?" He blinked. "What?" "When you got back together with Tessa, you said you'd changed, that things would be different. How did that work out?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't need to answer. The silence told me enough. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," I said, voice calm. "I just think you confuse regret with growth. Missing something isn't the same as becoming better." His eyes shimmered just a little. "So that's it. You really don't want to try?" "Barry, you burned the bridge," I said softly. "Then you stood there waiting for me to swim back." He gave a broken laugh, rubbing a hand across his face. "You sound different. Colder." "No," I said. "Just clear." He stared down at his coffee, swirling the melting ice, avoiding my eyes. "I thought if I apologized, you'd remember how good we were," he whispered. "I do remember," I said, and for a moment my voice cracked. "That's exactly why I won't go back." He looked up, eyes searching for something that wasn't there anymore. "You really moved on, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, I had to." He smiled sadly. "I'm happy for you then." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. When I stood to leave, he didn't stop me. He just watched that faint, lost expression softening into quiet acceptance. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. As I reached the door, I looked back once. He was sitting there alone, staring at the empty seat across from him. And in that moment, I realized something. For years, I'd thought I was the one waiting for him to be honest. But maybe he'd always been the one waiting for me to disappear. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit the pavement warm and gold. I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me settle for good. The ghost was finally gone. 6 months. That's how long it took for everything to come full circle. Half a year since I'd walked out of that apartment suitcase, half packed, heart completely emptied. Half a year since I stopped explaining myself to someone who only listened to reply. And in that time, something miraculous happened. My life stopped orbiting around the wreckage he left behind. I didn't wake up thinking about what he might post. I didn't check my phone expecting closure that would never come. I simply lived. My new apartment began to look like me. There were sketches pinned to the walls, soft jazz on the weekends, a growing forest of plants that somehow survived my inconsistent watering. I even adopted a cat, a quiet gray one I named Nova. She followed me from room to room like a little shadow that didn't ask for more than company. Work was different too, freer. My boss noticed the change first. "Cynthia, you've been on fire lately," she'd said one morning during a meeting. "You ever think about leading a project yourself?" 6 months ago, I would have hesitated, worrying. Barry would think I was too ambitious, too busy, too much. Now I just smiled and said yes. The project became a success, and for the first time in years, I saw my name on something that was mine alone. My own decisions, my own effort, my own peace. It's funny how love can make you forget the sound of your own voice, and how silence once feared becomes the melody you didn't know you were missing. Then, one Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in months. Barry. Hey, can we please talk? Just 5 minutes. It's important. I stared at the screen. For a moment I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity, that old traitorous instinct, whispered again. Another message followed seconds later. Please, Cynthia, I just need to see you. I'm at that coffee shop we used to go to. I could have ignored him. Probably should have. But some part of me wanted to see him one last time, not to reopen wounds, but to confirm they'd truly healed. So I went. He was sitting at our old table by the window nursing a half-empty cup. The once confident man looked smaller. His hair was longer, unkempt. His eyes carried the weight of someone who'd spent months bargaining with ghosts. Hey, I said quietly, taking the seat across from him. He looked up, managing a weak smile. You came. For a few minutes. He nodded, staring down at his hands. I'm not going to lie, he began. Things haven't been great. Work's a mess. I lost focus. Ryan, my manager let me go last week. He paused, then added in, Tessa left too. Said I made her feel invisible. I stayed silent. There was nothing I could say that life hadn't already told him. He continued, voice trembling slightly. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I can't stop thinking about what we had, how you made everything feel steady. I thought I wanted excitement, but all I did was destroy the only peace I ever had. That word again. Peace. He said it like it was a person he'd misplaced. Barry, I said gently, you didn't want peace. You wanted permission to keep breaking things and still feel loved for it. He looked at me like he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. You confuse comfort with goodness. You called me your calm, but what you really meant was your silence. You liked that I didn't challenge you, that I absorbed your chaos and called it love. His eyes glistened. You make it sound like I'm a monster. No, I said softly. Just a man who never learned that love without honesty is just control in prettier language. He looked down again, his fingers tightening around the cup. I just thought maybe we could start over, he said finally. Go slow. I've changed. I studied him, his shoulders slumped, voice cracking at the edges. Maybe he had changed, but not for me and not enough. You told her that too, didn't you? His head snapped up. What? When you got back together with Tessa, you said you'd changed, that it would work this time. How did that turn out? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said, my tone even, but missing someone doesn't mean you've grown. Regret isn't redemption. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead his lips pressed into a thin line. So that's it, he whispered. You won't even try. I smiled sadly. No, Barry. You burned the bridge, and then you waited for me to swim back across the ashes. He let out a soft laugh, bitter and tired. You sound different. I am different, I said, because I finally started listening to myself. He blinked, hard tears threatening to spill. I thought if I said sorry, you'd remember how good we were. I do remember, I said. That's why I'll never go back. For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the espresso machine, the clink of a spoon against porcelain, and the slow rhythm of closure settling in. He looked out the window, eyes red. You really moved on, huh? Yeah, I said softly. I had to. He nodded slowly. I hope you find what you're looking for. I already did, I said. Myself. When I stood to leave, he didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the reflection of a woman who no longer belonged to his story. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the city buzzed around me, alive, unpredictable, unfiltered. For the first time, I didn't need to narrate my own pain. I didn't need to prove I'd healed. I simply was. Later that night, as I sat by the window with Nova curled in my lap, I scrolled back through old photos just once. Not to reminisce, but to remind myself of how far I'd come. Because healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without bleeding. If Barry ever tells this story, I know he'll spin it differently. He'll say I changed. He'll say I gave up. He'll say I stopped caring. And maybe he's right, because I did change. I gave up trying to fix someone who mistook silence for peace, and I stopped caring about being understood by the person who taught me the cost of misunderstanding myself. The truth is simple, I didn't change to hurt him. I changed to stop hurting myself. As I closed my eyes that night, the last line of our story wrote itself softly in my mind. Peace isn't loud. It's simply the moment you stop explaining your worth. And that's exactly where I found mine. My name is Margaret Collins, 34 years old, and I can tell you the exact night I stopped being the steady girlfriend and became invisible to the man I loved. It wasn't during a fight or even in the aftermath of some betrayal. It was when he looked at me across a crowded restaurant table surrounded by his friends and laughed when someone asked what I did for a living. He didn't even mean it cruelly, at least not on the surface. But cruelty doesn't always come dressed in anger. Sometimes it hides inside a joke. I'd met Evan 6 years earlier in college. He was all charm and momentum, majoring in PR, building a network before graduation, always the loudest voice in the room. I was the opposite, a software engineer who preferred screens and silence to small talk. We were opposites, and at first that balance worked. He once said I grounded him, and I remember smiling at that word like it was a compliment. It isn't. It's something you say about an anchor, steady, useful, but meant to stay still. When he got his first big PR job downtown, I was proud. I even turned down a relocation offer with a top software firm in Seattle to stay in his city because he said long distance kills relationships. I believed him. I believed in us. We built a small apartment life together, shared grocery lists, takeout nights, candles on cheap IKEA tables. It was humble, but it was ours. I thought that kind of consistency meant love. But lately, consistency had become routine, predictable, unimpressive, especially when compared to Evan's friends and their shiny jobs in finance, marketing, and law. Every dinner out with them felt like an evaluation. I'd sit there listening to discussions about campaigns and clients while sipping my wine quietly until someone inevitably asked, "So, Margaret, what do you do again?" I'd smile. Software engineering, back-end systems mostly. And before I could explain further, Evan would laugh and add, "She keeps the lights on, literally. Tech stuff, not my world." Everyone would chuckle politely. That night, though, he said something different, something that settled in my chest like a stone. "Margaret's dependable. You can set your watch to her." Dependable. It sounded like a compliment to strangers, but to me, it was the sound of a door closing. At home later, I asked him why he said it like that. He shrugged. "You are dependable. That's a good thing." Then, half under his breath, "You just don't spark much anymore." That was the first crack in the floor. Weeks passed. His hours stretched longer. Work dinners, networking events, always just another client meeting. He'd come home past midnight smelling like expensive perfume I didn't own. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe the story I'd built about us. But trust needs tending, and he'd stopped watering it long ago. One Thursday evening, the office server maintenance wrapped early, and I decided to surprise him with his favorite takeout and a bottle of wine. I remember humming, as I walked into the apartment, our playlist still looping faintly from the smart speaker. But the humming stopped the moment I saw the laptop glowing on the kitchen table. Evan never left his laptop unlocked. That night it was open an email draft half-typed. At first I told myself not to look. I hated that version of myself, suspicious and small. But then I saw the subject line, "Last night was everything, Maddie." And curiosity broke into instinct. The thread stretched for months. Flirty comments, private jokes, hotel bookings under initials, pictures her face angled perfectly smiling at him the way I used to, a vascular surgeon judging by her email signature, Dr. Madeline Shaw, the kind of woman who saves lives for a living. The kind Evan once said understands ambition. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there staring at proof that my love story had expired quietly while I was busy being dependable. When the front door opened an hour later, he looked startled to see me home. "Hey, babe," he said, hanging his jacket casually. "You're early." His voice was smooth, unbothered, the voice of a man who thought the world still revolved around him. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just asked, "Who's Madeline?" He froze for a second, eyes darting to the table. Then nothing. No panic. Just that same detached confidence. "Oh," he said, like he'd forgotten she existed. "So you saw that." My stomach dropped. "You've been seeing her." He nodded once. "For a while, yeah. Just like that. For a while, yeah." The conversation that followed felt like walking barefoot on glass. Every sentence cut deeper. "You've been comfortable, Margaret," he said. "Safe. I need someone who pushes me. Maddie's in medicine. She's driven intense." I could barely hear my own voice when I asked, 6 years Evan, "You're throwing 6 years away because my job isn't thrilling enough." He smiled faintly. "Come on. Don't make this dramatic. You'll be fine. You always are." That's when I realized he'd already left me emotionally months ago. This was just the formality. I remember looking around the apartment, the books I'd organized, the candles I'd lit, the quiet life we'd built together. All of it suddenly felt like stage props from a play I hadn't realized had ended. He kept talking about growth and energy, about how we'd grown apart. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, "You wanted excitement, Evan. I hope she gives you fireworks." He looked confused. "That's it." I nodded. "That's it." Then I walked out mid-sentence, the door closing with the softest click I'd ever heard. That night, I didn't scream into my pillow. I didn't call my friends or post cryptic quotes online. I sat by the window, the city lights flickering across my reflection, and whispered to myself. He wanted noise. I gave him silence. And for the first time in years, that silence felt like power. Morning light spilled through my half-closed blinds, turning my small apartment into a pale watercolor of memories and mistakes. I didn't cry that night, but I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out the sound inside me. The only proof I was still alive was the rhythmic hum of my laptop fan on the nightstand. When the sun rose, I made a decision that startled even me. I wasn't going to fight for someone who'd already left. Evan didn't call that night. Not the next morning either. It took him 2 days to reach out, as if cheating was just a scheduling inconvenience. "We need to talk," his text read. No apology, no context. I stared at it for a long time before replying with just one word. "Sure." We met at the cafe 2 blocks from our old apartment, the one where we used to celebrate small things. First job, first raise, first trip together. The barista recognized us, smiled politely, unaware that the couple who once sat shoulder to shoulder there now sat across a chasm. He looked the same tailored coat, confident posture, but his eyes had that glint of someone rehearsing a speech, not giving a confession. "Margaret," he began, voice soft, performative. "I didn't plan for it to happen. Maddie and I, it just evolved." "Like an app update," I said quietly. He blinked, thrown off by my calm. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You know me. I've always needed a partner who matches my drive. You're steady, but sometimes I feel like I'm pulling us forward alone." I sipped my coffee, eyes never leaving his. "Forward to what, Evan? Another woman's arms." He sighed, frustrated, like I was missing the point. "It's not about her. It's about me outgrowing who I was. You stay the same, Margaret. You're safe, predictable. People like you never get anywhere big." I should have been shaking. Instead, I laughed softly at first, then louder. Heads turned. "People like me." "You mean the ones who held you up when you failed that big pitch? The ones who paid rent while you chased your PR fantasy, unpaid? The ones who made sure you had clean shirts for your networking dinners?" His jaw clenched. "See, this is why I couldn't tell you. You always make things emotional." I felt something shift inside me. The heartbreak began to harden into clarity. You don't get to use words like growth to decorate your betrayal. He leaned back, arms crossed, smirking. "You'll thank me one day. I'm freeing you to find someone on your level." That sentence lodged itself deep, echoing in my chest. For 6 years, I'd built a life where his validation was the reward. I hadn't noticed how small I'd made myself to fit his comfort. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair in. "Thank you, Evan," I said, voice steady, "for showing me that I mistook cruelty for ambition." He frowned. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I smiled faintly. "You always complained I didn't take risks. Here's one." Back home, I packed my life into 3 boxes. It was astonishing how little space 6 years of love actually took up. Books, sweaters, a framed photo from a cabin trip where he'd once told me he couldn't live without me. I left the frame on the counter. Let him decide what that memory meant now. On a sheet of paper, I wrote just 6 words. "Goodbye, Evan. No need to explain." I placed it next to his favorite mug, the one that said Future CEO. Then I left. That evening, I checked into a short-term apartment across the river. The air there smelled different, freer. I ordered cheap takeout, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen of my code editor. For hours, I typed nothing. Then, without planning to, I began writing not code, but memories. A letter to myself. A promise. Never again will I let someone mistake your calm for weakness. The first week was a blur of silence. Friends texted asking where I'd gone. I gave vague answers. My therapist, a calm woman named Yvonne, told me something that stuck. "You don't have to be dramatic to be brave." I carried that line with me everywhere. By the second week, the routine began to form. Morning jogs, coffee alone by the window, coding marathons that stretched till midnight. The loneliness still hurt, but it was cleaner now, like pain after surgery. Necessary. At the gym, I met people who didn't care what I did for a living, just whether I showed up and pushed through the reps. Every drop of sweat felt like a small reclaiming of self. One night, while scrolling absent-mindedly through my old messages, I saw Evan's name again. He'd sent one final text before I blocked him. "I hope you find whatever excitement you're looking for." I stared at it for a while, then typed into my notes app. Excitement isn't a person. It's peace after chaos. Months later, a mutual friend called to update me without being asked. Apparently, Evan and Madeline had gone public quickly. Perfect couple, everyone said, until whispers started that her hospital was auditing some of her cases. He'd quit his job to help manage her schedule. Someone joked they were the power couple who lost the power. I didn't say much, just smiled into the phone. When the call ended, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Let the storm come. I'm finally dry." That night, as I drifted to sleep, my phone buzzed. A new email notification. The sender's name froze me mid-breath. Evan Parker. Subject: "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I turned off the phone, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The email sat there for days, unread, like a ghost knocking softly on a locked door. Every morning I'd see it first thing, his name glowing in my inbox, and every morning I'd scroll past it, because I already knew what it said. Every apology follows the same formula: regret, nostalgia, then self-pity. And I was done being the listener in his redemption arc. By then it had been nearly 4 months since I left. 4 months of silence, healing, and trying to learn how to exist without performing strength for anyone else. At first, the quiet felt unbearable. I used to fall asleep to the sound of Evan's voice muttering half-conscious marketing ideas beside me. Now the only sound was my own breathing. But day by day, the silence changed flavor. It went from emptiness to clarity. It started to sound less like loss and more like freedom. I'd started therapy properly by then. Yvonne, my therapist, was the first person who didn't look at me with pity when I said I'd been cheated on. She just asked, "Did you love him, or did you love who you thought he'd become?" That question sat with me for weeks. Some nights I'd pace around my apartment replaying old scenes like reruns. His smirk at that dinner party, his dismissive tone when I tried to share my project wins. And each time I saw it a little clearer, I'd loved a version of him that existed only because I kept forgiving the real one. Work became my shelter. When I was deep in code, I didn't think about him. I started volunteering for tougher projects, late-night deployments, anything that stretched my focus to exhaustion. My team noticed. My manager called me into her office one Friday. "Margaret, I'm recommending you for the systems architect track," she said. "You've been on fire lately." Her words caught me off guard. Fire. It felt ironic being called that after spending years being told I wasn't exciting enough. That night, I walked home under the city's amber glow, feeling like maybe finally I was starting to build something that was only mine. One evening, during a team outing, someone mentioned spotting Evan at a charity gala with Madeline. The tone of voice said more than the words. Pity mixed with curiosity. "He didn't look great," my coworker said, "like he's aged 10 years. I pretended to shrug it off. But when I got home, I couldn't resist checking. Her social media was still public. Perfectly curated photos: Madeline in a black gown, Evan. Beside her eyes, dull, despite the smile. The captions reeked of forced joy. But one thing caught my eye. A comment under a photo from one of her colleagues. "Hope the investigation stuff clears soon. Hang in there." Investigation. I stared at that word far longer than I should have, and then almost against my will, I smiled. Karma doesn't need your permission. It doesn't even need your attention. It just works quietly like background code, cleaning up corrupted data. And I wasn't going to interfere. I'd already paid my dues in heartbreak. The universe could handle the rest. Weeks later, my friend Mila dropped by with wine and takeout. She'd been the only one who hadn't tried to tell me maybe it was a misunderstanding. That night, between bites of cold noodles, she said, "I ran into someone who works with Madeline. Word is the hospital's reviewing her surgeries. Some billing mess, maybe fraud." Evan's name came up too. Apparently he's been freelancing her PR, but it's tanking. I didn't say a word. I just took another sip of wine, watching the rain race down the window pane. Mila smirked. "You're not going to say anything, huh?" "No," I said softly. "Some stories end better when you don't narrate them." By then, I'd started journaling every night. Not about Evan, not directly, about the way I was changing. Entry day 98. I'm not broken, just repurposed. Entry day 120. The silence that used to scare me is now the proof I survived him. It's strange how life starts to refill itself when you stop trying to chase the people who emptied it. I began joining small tech meetups again. Met people who saw value in my quiet focus instead of mistaking it for dullness. One guy, Noah, asked me about a new AI module I'd built for work. When I finished explaining, he said, "That's incredible. You make complex things sound simple." It wasn't flirtation, it was respect. And I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me like that with admiration instead of condescension. Then came another email. Same sender. Different tone in the subject line this time. "I miss you, Margaret, please." I hovered over delete, but curiosity won for a second. Inside it said, "Things with Maddie aren't what I thought. She's under stress, the investigation's tearing her apart, and I miss what we had. The peace, the stability. You were home. Can we talk?" Home. The word that once felt sacred now read like an insult, because to him, home was never about love, it was about convenience. I closed the email and archived it. No anger, no tears. Just quiet certainty. He didn't want me. He wanted relief from the chaos he'd chosen. That night I stood on my balcony, wind in my hair, city lights flickering like Morse code across the skyline. For a moment, I imagined his life unraveling somewhere across town, his phone lighting up unanswered, his words bouncing off the walls of an empty apartment. And then I let the thought go. Because I finally understood the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. In the silence that followed, I smiled. I'd spent years craving his attention. Now I had something rarer, my peace. He taught me how to vanish quietly. I wrote in my journal, and in doing so, he taught me how to live loudly inside my own skin. It started with a rumor, small, harmless, almost forgettable. A coworker mentioned over lunch that she'd seen Evan's name floating around social media again, but not in the way he'd want. Something about a hospital review, a PR disaster, and a surgeon under fire. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Life has a way of forwarding you the news you've already stopped waiting for. 2 weeks later, Mila showed up at my door again, breathless, holding her phone like it was breaking news. "You have to see this," she said, scrolling rapidly before handing it to me. On the screen, a local news headline. "Prominent vascular surgeon under investigation for billing fraud and malpractice allegations." The accompanying photo showed Dr. Madeline Shaw perfectly coiffed, but with eyes that betrayed exhaustion. And standing behind her in the background, like a misplaced accessory, was Evan. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even pretending to be the confident PR star anymore. Just a man caught in the blast radius of his own choices. Mila exhaled sharply. Word is she overbilled insurance companies and performed unnecessary procedures. He was helping spin her public image until it all came crashing down. I handed her back the phone quietly. "Do you feel bad for him?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "But I don't feel good either. I just don't feel anything." That night, I lay awake watching the ceiling fan slice through the dark. A strange calm settled over me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but closure that didn't need an audience. Because deep down I understood what was happening. Evan had traded stability for spectacle, and spectacle always burns brightest right before it dies out. Over the following month, the news snowballed. Madeline's medical license was suspended pending review. A few of her ex-patients came forward with lawsuits. Hospitals severed ties. Her glossy reputation turned radioactive overnight. And with her fall came his. The PR firm Evan worked for temporarily terminated his contract. He'd resigned publicly to focus on supporting his partner through a difficult time, but anyone could see the truth he'd hitched his name to a sinking ship. Mutual acquaintances started whispering again. Someone told Mila that Evan had been different lately, withdrawn, controlling. Apparently, he'd convinced Madeline to quit medicine for her mental health and depend on him financially while he handled damage control. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who once mocked me for being too steady was now obsessively clinging to the ruins of the life he thought was exciting. One afternoon, I found myself at the same cafe where we'd had that final talk months ago. Different table, different me. The barista, still recognizing me faintly, asked, "Haven't seen you with your boyfriend lately. Everything good?" I smiled. Better than good. I'd long since stopped checking his socials, but sometimes the internet doesn't wait for you to look, it finds you. A tagged post appeared in my feed one morning, a charity event full of local professionals and reporters. There she was, Madeline alone. Her smile stretched too wide, eyes hollow. No Evan in sight. The caption read, "Bravery means facing consequences with grace." I didn't like it. I didn't comment. But I whispered to my coffee, "Grace is easier when you didn't create the storm." Around that same time, I got promoted officially lead software architect. It was the kind of role Evan would have bragged about on LinkedIn for months, but I didn't post about it. I just quietly updated my email signature and went for a walk along the river. The wind was crisp that evening, carrying the scent of rain and pavement. Somewhere across the city, I imagined Evan sitting in a dim living room, the TV flickering, with his own scandal looping on replay. Maybe he'd think of me. Maybe he wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. A few nights later, a new email appeared. The subject line, "I don't know who else to talk to." I knew who it was before I even opened it. "Margaret, you probably saw the news. Everything's falling apart. Maddie's been suspended and we're drowning in debt. I thought I was helping her, but she's changed. She won't listen, won't let me fix anything. I miss what we had. You were my calm. You always knew how to ground me. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, the irony almost poetic. He was asking for the same boring stability he once despised. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally, I wrote one sentence. "You made your choice, Evan. Live it." Then I hit send. A week later, a mutual friend texted me. "He's been showing up places asking about you. Looks rough. You might want to block his new number." I already had. Some lessons don't need repetition. That night I journaled again. Entry day 186. I didn't wish him pain. I just stopped wishing him comfort. For the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for closure from him because I'd already given it to myself. There's a line my therapist once said that echoed in my mind. "Some people don't deserve your silence as punishment. They deserve it as peace." So I kept my peace. I didn't tell anyone when I signed the new lease for a better apartment. Didn't mention that I'd started hiking on weekends. Didn't share how light the air felt these days. The world didn't need to see my healing to know it was happening. By the time the news cycle moved on and Madeline's case faded from the headlines, I barely remembered the ache that once consumed me. I'd outgrown it quietly, like shedding a skin. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized something profound. When the storm finally found them, I didn't even need to watch, because I'd already walked out of the rain. The silence had lasted almost a year, long enough for scars to turn into faint lines, long enough for his name to stop echoing in my chest, but not long enough apparently for him to stop trying to reach me. It began with another email, then another, then calls from numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails that started polite, turned pleading, and finally desperate. The first one said, "Margaret, I know you don't owe me anything, but please hear me out. Things got bad, really bad. Maddie," she's not the person I thought. I made a mistake. I didn't reply. The next one came 2 days later. "You were my stability, my calm. I was stupid to let that go. I just need to talk to you. Please." Still, I stayed silent. Then came the anger. "Ignoring me is childish. I'm trying to make amends." "You're not perfect either, Margaret." It was always the same pattern with him. Every apology was just a different version of control. When words didn't work, he changed tactics. Messages started coming from other people. His mother emailed me the subject line, "Family sticks together." "Evan's going through a hard time, dear. He's always spoken highly of you. Don't turn your back now. He needs kindness." Kindness. As if I hadn't bled kindness for 6 years straight. Then a mutual friend, Sarah, left a voicemail. "Come on, Margaret. He's falling apart. You've moved on. You can afford to be generous." Generous. That word stung. They made it sound like forgiveness was currency I owed. By the third week even, his tone changed again, resentful, bitter. "You think you're better than me now? You're not. You're just cold. I hope your new life's as empty as you are." I didn't even flinch. That used to be his favorite trick, cut deep, then pull back with tears and apologies. Not this time. The universe must have sensed my steadiness because almost simultaneously it handed me a new chapter. One crisp morning, I got an email from my manager titled "Promotion Confirmation." I stared at it for a long time, rereading the line that said, "Congratulations, lead systems architect, global operations." My hands trembled, not because I was shocked, but because I realized I hadn't needed his approval to climb. I'd done it all quietly in the same silence he once mocked me for. That weekend, I attended a friend's wedding, a small rooftop ceremony under a sky full of fairy lights. People laughed, danced, toasted to love that still believed in itself. And somewhere between the music and laughter, I saw him. Evan. He looked ordinary. No tailored arrogance, no charming grin. just a tired man standing at the edge of a crowd that no longer revolved around him. He spotted me. His eyes widened, and for a split second I saw that same flicker of entitlement, the belief that if he spoke, I'd still listen. He walked toward me, slowly rehearsing his regret in every step. "Margaret," he said softly, "you look good. Better than I remember." I smiled politely. I could say the same, but I'd be lying. He flinched, then chuckled awkwardly. "I deserved that." "Deserved much more," I replied. He exhaled, looking down at the floor. "Everything fell apart after you left. I thought I wanted adventure, but I was chasing noise. Maddie's gone now. She lost her license, Margaret. And me, I lost everything." His voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. I waited until he was done, then said quietly, "You didn't lose everything. You threw it away." He looked at me, like a drowning man spotting the shore. "I just need one chance. We were good together. You made me calm." I shook my head. "No, I made you comfortable. That's not the same thing." He frowned. "So that's it. You're really that heartless." Heartless. The irony almost made me laugh. I took out my phone, opened my email, and showed him the screen my new promotion letter. "Lead systems architect," I said. "Global ops." They wanted someone dependable. For a moment, the words didn't register. Then I saw it, the flicker of disbelief turning into regret. "You're doing well," he muttered, almost resentful. "I am," I said simply, and I did it without being exciting. He swallowed, eyes glossy. "Can't we start over?" I tilted my head slightly. "Evan, starting over implies there's something left to build on." "There isn't." Then I smiled, soft but unshakable. "You once said I was predictable. Turns out peace is pretty consistent." I walked away before he could answer. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Margaret, wait." I didn't. Because for once, he was the one standing in the silence. Later that night when I got home, I opened my journal and wrote, "Entry day 3 and 12, he chased chaos, thinking it was life. I built peace, and it became mine." The next morning, my phone buzzed again, one final message. "You'll regret this one day." I stared at it, then took a screenshot of my promotion letter and replied with 6 words. "I'm not boring anymore. Goodbye." Then I blocked him for the last time. At lunch, Mila called laughing. "He's furious. Apparently your response went viral in our group chat." "Good," I said, smiling. "Let him finally know what quiet confidence sounds like." That night, I looked at myself in the mirror before bed. No tears, no anger, just calm. I whispered to my reflection. He used to think my silence was weakness. Turns out it was rehearsal. It's strange how life reclaims itself after heartbreak, not all at once, but in small, steady breaths. Somewhere between the early mornings and late-night coding sessions, I stopped counting days since Evan. Time lost its edges. The ache faded like an old bruise. Now when people ask if I'm single, I smile not from sadness, but peace. Because for the first time, my life isn't defined by what I lost, but what I found after letting go. A year had passed since that rooftop wedding. I'd relocated to a new city for the promotion, sleek skyline, clean air. The kind of place where no one knows your story unless you tell it. My new apartment overlooked the river, its windows catching sunrise light, just the way I liked gold on glass, silent and unassuming. I decorated the space with calm colors, ivory, warm brown, a single green plant that somehow refused to die. Every inch of it felt earned. On my first morning there, I brewed coffee and watched boats glide across the water. The old version of me would have snapped a photo, captioned it. Something poetic, maybe even tagged Evan subconsciously. This version of me didn't. I just took a deep breath and whispered, "You made it." Some evenings I'd walk home past a nearby park. There I often saw couples on benches holding hands, arguing softly, laughing about things that would probably hurt later. I used to envy that closeness. Now I only admired it from afar. It wasn't that I'd stopped believing in love. I'd just stopped mistaking noise for connection. Love, I realized, isn't a spark. It's a steady flame, quiet, constant, sometimes invisible, but warm. One Saturday afternoon, I met Noah again, the man from the tech meetup who once admired my project explanation. We'd kept in touch, casually exchanging articles and coffee recommendations. He'd moved to the same city recently, coincidentally joining a partner firm that collaborated with ours. We met for lunch, just 2 colleagues catching up, or at least that's what I told myself. But when he listened, really listened to my stories, I caught myself smiling without effort. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't talk over me. He didn't make me feel small so he could feel tall. And when he said, "You seem peaceful," I almost laughed because no one had ever used that as a compliment before. That evening, as we parted ways, Noah said gently, Maybe we can do this again sometime. I nodded. I'd like that. But I didn't rush to label it. Not everything quiet has to become a storm. Weeks passed. Work flourished, friendships deepened, and for the first time I stopped narrating my life in past tense. Every day wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. One night, as I prepared a late report, my phone buzzed, a notification I hadn't seen in months. A name I'd buried under blocked lists somehow resurfaced: Evan Parker. He'd created a new email address. The subject line, one last thing. I stared at it for a long time before curiosity got the better of me. Margaret, I saw your recent work mentioned online. You really did it. I just wanted to say congratulations. I miss who we used to be. I hope you're happy. Truly. I reread the last line twice. It didn't sting. It didn't soothe. It just was. Like reading the weather report for a city you no longer live in. I hit delete without replying, because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. That weekend, I visited the coast, a solo trip I'd promised myself months ago. The sea was wild that day, wind cutting across the shore, waves roaring like they had something to prove. I stood there barefoot, feeling the salt on my skin, the pull of the tide tugging softly at my ankles. Somewhere in the rhythm of the waves, I heard a truth: you don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering differently. I closed my eyes, whispering into the wind, "Thank you for breaking me open." Because without that chaos, I would have never met this quiet version of myself, the one who doesn't beg to be understood, who doesn't mistake peace for boredom, who doesn't chase validation disguised as love. When I got home that night, I turned on the soft lights, poured tea, and opened my journal one last time. I wrote, "Entry day 4/12. He called me predictable, but predictability built my peace, my career, my joy. He chased storms. I learned to love the sunrise." I underlined the last line twice, then closed the book. As the city outside drifted to sleep, I sat by the window here, undone music, low laptop humming softly. No emails waiting, no ghosts knocking, just the hum of my own steady life. And in that moment, I realized the silence that once broke me had become my happy ending. What do you think? Was Margaret right to walk away? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.